What's up? Welcome to a new episode of Movie Schmovie. This is episode number 441. Is that right? Are we that
That's
high?
right.
That's where we're at. Okay, 441. My name is Steve. I'm one of the co-hosts of the show, and as always, I'm joined by
Ron.
Do I look like a man who misplaces money? And John.
and John. Hey, John. I thought you'd have like a nice background behind you for this required viewing, like a nice.
You're saying something like this. It's going to load any minute now. Come on. If it doesn't load, then it's made a fool of me.
Computer's going to crash.
Yeah.
And you just froze.
Uh-huh.
Oh.
There we go.
There he goes. There he goes.
I thought you'd literally turn into an intercom or
Yeah, no, like
I could.
You
I
went
could.
away. You went away, and like it didn't superimpose.
It would be great
you
if I
over
just
it.
then was like, all right, come on.
Yeah, yeah.
What's your order?
If it just like made a sound wave coming out of it every time you spoke.
Well, I'm not in the business of talking about other people's business, but if I was, I would tell you that yes, they were here.
Welcome to the pod. We're kind of in line for a kind of standard classic episode today. This is like catching up on required viewing, and then basically everything we've seen in the past 2 weeks. We had a little bit of a gap here. Illness is in the air, as it is everywhere,
Man.
it seems these days, and took us down for a week, but we're back. And
We're back, baby.
Hey. Ronald, you said you wanted to mention some news real quick at the top of the show before we get going, right? What was the news item you wanted to say?
Yeah, so Amazon acquiring the James Bond franchise from MGM, right?
Right,
Or they
right.
bought MGM. This is confusing because, all right, so they have the license. They have it. They own it. And
Distributed, yeah.
Distributed, yes. But one of the conflicts that always existed was the Broccoli family that oversaw the franchise for 60 years at this point. Oversaw scripts, castings, etc. Even after this was acquired, have now lost their, seem to have stepped down, and now Amazon has full control over the Bond franchise.
No, I confess.
I wouldn't say they lost anything. I would say
They sold it, right?
Yeah,
they sold
they
it for a
sold it.
lot of money.
I was going to say I've only seen like the headlines and then the conversations about this. So I did not know what the circumstances were, whether it was like, the terms of a deal expired or if it was money exchanging hands, but I suspected that they so the Broccolis, whether people know this or not, the Broccoli family has been responsible for, as Ronald said, kind of like the shepherding the James Bond films through all these different phases. And this is the thing I'm not going to look up, but my understanding is the Broccoli family is the family after which broccoli is named. Like it goes back. No, it goes back that far. I'm not joking. That like it's not that they have the name of broccoli. It's that the name that they have goes far enough back that it has to do with why broccoli is called broccoli. And I don't know if it's because of a city or I don't know what broccoli originally was. But I did hear some trivia like that. And what I'm going to not do is research that. I'm not going to take the fun out of it.
Not.
If you're out there listening and you know I'm dead wrong about this, just what, enjoy being right. And know that I'm going to look it up later and I'm going to know what's true. But that right now we're just having fun with broccoli. But no, it's a funny name. Admittedly it's a very funny name to be like, well, the Broccolis have lost James Bond. You know?
Because they make a lot of broccoli from the franchise.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's an accepted slang for money, right?
That's classic slang right there.
You know what? That's like old Hepcat slang. It's like, hey man, lay some broccoli on me.
Yes.
But hey, could you front me some broccoli? Just a few stalks. When I was a kid, I used to pretend that broccoli was tiny trees.
Yeah, same. Same. My daughter calls it trees.
That got me into it. Like I was like not interested in broccoli, but when I realized they were like tiny trees that I could pretend that I was eating, suddenly it opened up the whole world of enjoying broccoli.
Like you were a giant.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the truth is, the Broccolis have been the family that are like, in addition to being characters on VeggieTales, the Broccoli family have been responsible for sort of like making sure that James Bond, whatever you think of that franchise, it is what it is because of this kind of this kind of strong-arm production style that has been bringing in directors and bringing in actors, but the real sort of auteurs of that series have been the family, or the through line of the production, as opposed to one director or any one actor. So it's interesting, and I don't know who among us is the biggest Bond boy. That's what Bond fans are called, right?
Bond, baby.
Bond.
I don't know. I feel like we're all kind of comparable with it. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think
like, what does it mean to you, Steve, that this is now changing hands? Does it seem like it portends anything for the movies?
No. I mean, not for the films. I mean, it has no real immediate impact. I think if anything, it probably means that we're going to probably see more Bond films, like at a faster clip. I think because I mean, they're pretty. It's pretty well known how kind of strict their creative control over the franchise has been, both on the creative side in terms of who is directing the films or writing or the production itself, post-production. Like there's been a lot of reporting on kind of how involved they are in the creative process. So, I mean, I think that kind of extends a lot of the productions, and it's why, I don't remember the exact length in terms of how long Daniel Craig has been Bond, that he's only kind of been in, 5 Bond movies? Is it 5 or 6? But yeah, I don't know. I think Amazon, years back bought MGM and, I think $8.5 billion. So this decision, when they've been trying to get more Bond films made, the creative piece of it is really what Amazon is inheriting. So like they both still co-own Bond. So the Broccoli's or their production company, Eon, they have economic stake in the franchise still. But the creative piece, the decision about the creative intellectual property decisions are what, a lot of people have been, I guess, maybe hoping that would happen for a long time because of what I just described, like the kind of strict nature that they approach it, which is for better or worse. And, from their perspective, at least, but I don't know what that means. Like Amazon's is the creative decision behind it now. I don't know that that's necessarily the best group. I mean, they have a pretty strong creative team in their film division, and that's something that they're trying to build out and improve upon. But this is like now they've had it, but now they really have a true franchise. Which is ahead of what other streamers don't have. Netflix, film wise, I mean, they have Knives Out that kind of got acquired, but I mean, Amazon has James Bond now, and but I don't know. Back to your initial question, like it doesn't concern me, worry me, excite me, anything right now. I think it just comes down to seeing like how the big thing for me is like how it affects the pacing of the franchise, because I think the Bond films have been fairly slow to come out, especially when you look around the landscape and see like what became of the last 10 years. The fact that there's like 2 Bond films, that's kind of crazy when you think about it. So, the pacing is the key for me, is to see if they bring it up quicker. Because even after Daniel Craig kind of ended his Bond run, there's been nothing but speculation over, who would be the next Bond, what was being developed when, what the timeline was. So I expect that's going to be something in the next 3 to 4 months is going to probably pick up a pace pretty substantially.
Well, I mean, it is interesting you mentioned that, because that's almost what I always think about when I think about the Bond franchise, is just how long they can go between movies, and how it almost seems like patience at times, but it also can seem like extreme indecision and extreme like insecurity about what's happening. And I don't know, that's an interesting thought, that fans might see more Bond films, content, whatever, or at least one every 2 or 3 years as opposed to every 5 or 6 years or whatever it's been, or whatever it can be. But also I feel like the people that they mention when they talk about someone taking over for Bond, I always feel like people mention actors that are already too old. But who knows, if you're doing something that was set on a faster clip, or maybe if they were doing something where there's a planned series of movies where one would come out every couple of years, maybe you can get one of these older actors and it's not so ridiculous. But the idea to me of signing on Idris Elba or something, I mean, I think he's now officially too old probably to jump into the role. But when
That's
people
how
were
long
even
the speculation's been happening.
But when people have started talking about him, he seemed too old to me to be the new guy who then is going to have 7 years between movies or something. So it is kind of interesting. But don't you think that some of the allure of the movies has something to do with the fact that it seems like kind of a specialty item, a boutique item? Or are we kind of past that? Do you think there's just more? There's more gold in the idea that they could be managing the IP in a more modern way? Is it just like it's kind of an old-fashioned approach to say that you can stay relevant and really stay, only put out 2 things a decade,
Right.
I mean, I think that the Bond name is almost like Chicken McNugget. I mean, it's like it's synonymous with like
class.
Culture. It's
like you either get 4, 6, 10, or 20.
Right.
I'm not really sure how it's synonymous. Well, Chicken McNugget is what you thought of when you said synonymous with culture.
Like, just the way that you say, like, so kids don't call chicken nuggets chicken nuggets. They call it Chicken McNuggets. And I feel like the same way about spies and stuff like that. Like spies are not spies. They're Bond. They're like they are the Chicken McNugget. He's the specific version of a spy that we know.
If you're trying to say that like Slow Horses is what it is, you might say it's like James Bond if it was Losers. You know what I mean? Like you use James Bond as the reference point for spies.
So people use that. People use brands that the way that like
Xerox.
Xerox, Q-tip, you know what I mean? Like, these things are very specific, but people don't realize that they're even brands that they're referencing. And so, like, when I think about Bond, it feels very synonymous with that is the definitive spot. Even when you're saying something is better than Bond, you compare, you use the word in it. It's like the Michael Jordan of, it's like that's what it feels like. Comparatively, Bond is what we compare things to, especially like specifically with the Mission Impossibles. Like Mission Impossibles have kind of taken the space of the Bond movies within the past couple of years because we don't have the movies as frequently, and they're filling a void of like espionage and explosions and punching people in the face that we're not getting as frequently. We would like to get as frequently with the Bond movies, which is unfortunate. And I don't think it's just going to be movies. I think that if Amazon's going to Amazon it, they're going to try to look for a prestige Bond TV show that might not be about Bond, but it might be about the organization or like the behind the scenes. Or
I mean, what you're talking about is like, yes, the obvious thing, right? Which is the franchise expansion. That's got to be what they're thinking. You're right.
Hell yeah, man. I mean, because think about it. I mean, now Amazon is like, when you think about quality, you think about like Fallout, Reacher. They're starting to make more things of quality. Like, I mean, even Mr. and Mrs. Smith that won an Emmy, right? They won like a daytime Emmy or something like that. These are prestige, starting to become prestige things that Amazon's putting together, and how crazy would it be to add to it, especially since Harry Potter's coming along, to have something to be like, hey, they have Harry Potter, we have James Bond over here at Amazon. Come watch our, this isn't about Bond, but it's about the mantle of this and the history and who makes the gadgets in the background and the facility that does, they could figure something out.
Well, if they could if they keep anybody from the Daniel Craig movies, which I don't know if they would at this point. For a while there, it seemed like they might, just because you had Ray Fine and you had Ben Whishaw and people like that. But now I feel like it would be pretty random to bring anybody in from those movies. But yeah, a Q series with Ben Whishaw would be pretty awesome. That was who it was, right? Okay.
Yeah.
I forget which actor I sometimes confused Ben Whishaw with, that I always wonder if I'm getting the wrong guy. But no, I'm just saying people love him. So I could see that being a thing that would have a hook to it, sort of. Yeah. But I also could see it not being the kind of thing where they want to muddy the waters. They don't want to do the thing that DC does and like confuse people with too many different versions of the same character, Right. So it should be like a universe thing. I don't know if I'm that interested in the James Bond universe, but I do think if they build it out in an interesting way, it could be something cool. But I think what you're kind of hinting at is the actual content of James Bond is kind of, it's been rehashed and rehashed and rehashed so many times that like a fresh take on it. One of the reasons why Daniel Craig felt so good as a choice was that he was playing a slightly more street level, like a little more bruiser. You still wonder what that modern take would be that would make it not feel like, okay, now we're fully sort of well and past this old-fashioned idea. So they need some kind of a fresh take, but James Bond is kind of resistant to being modernized too much. I don't know. I just think I don't know what honestly I would do if I was them, but my thought is I would just completely go in a direction that no one has gone yet with it, But I don't know, what do you want to see? Do you want to see a new James Bond, or do you want to see a new thing where like 007 is like a number that gets passed on to somebody, or you know what I mean? Would you want it to not be James Bond but be like a legacy hero, or would you want to see young Jimmy Bond earning his stripes? What do you think? Or should it be a man, like how far are they willing to twist this away from where it's been?
I kind of like the idea of it being a mantle, like James Bond is specifically a mantle of a person. Like they just, there's all those 00 whatevers, but then the guy that is the one that is gonna put it all on the line and risk it all, and he's the best at everything. That's James Bond. Mm-hmm. That could be like I don't know if you're watching Paradise. There's Sinatra. There's this character Sinatra that has his name like. I think about that kind of stuff. Like, what if that's the person? Like, what if as soon as you get 007, you're James Bond on the street? That's your street level name.
What about a new movie that kind of does what you're saying, but also doesn't really explain it and just says, okay, James Bond, and you're just starting over, and it takes you 5 minutes to figure out who James Bond is.
I'd like that.
And then you're just watching a movie, and it's like they used to do it. Like there wasn't an explanation of why Roger Moore looked different than maybe there was a joke about, I look different from the other guy or some shit like that. But I just kind of feel like overstating that. Like that's the one thing I would like to see them do that's not a concession to the modern era of interconnected shit. Is like just start fresh without pretending we're answering questions about all the earlier movies or anything. You know what I mean? Like don't get too cute with like how many, like trying to make all the worlds fit together. I don't think it really makes sense to say that Daniel Craig and Roger Moore existed in the same reality.
It just looks at a wall with all of their faces on it.
Yeah.
That would be interesting.
Some kind of hint that maybe the name James Bond is not the real name of the character, and a little bit of mystery about why that's the name. Seems if you were doing a television show, that's the kind of stuff you would milk over seasons. But you don't need to start off. You know what I mean? You don't need to start off with like you're the new graduate of the James Bond program. But I personally think just start fresh. But in my mind though, what is James Bond? Like he's kind of an asshole. He's kind of a womanizer. He's a drunk. He's if you go back to the books, he's a total asshole. Even if you look at the movies, he's got I guess what I'm saying is, what is the character of James Bond if you make him, her, whoever, if you make them modern, like what's left if you modernize James Bond too much?
Yeah,
it's just a name.
He got very emotional towards the end. He's like, he thought
Daniel Craig was emo by James Bond standards.
Yeah, he was like in a monogamous relationship, and he thought that he was getting cheated on. He's like, what? He got very angry, specifically the last two movies, man. He was very emotional.
He had love stuff. He had brother issues. He had sort of mommy issues with M. He was a very emotionally connected.
Deadbeat dad, possibly?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Question mark.
No, I mean, I'm always interested in James Bond. It's never been like my thing, but I'm always interested. So I will definitely be tuning in for whatever they do. And if they have a show, I'll give it a shot. You know, I don't always watch every espionage show that sounds like it might be good, but again, I'd be open to the idea that this is the kind of thing that they might do something special with. But I don't have a whole lot of hopes and dreams. I mean, the idea, I've heard some people say that they would like to see a truly retro one, like make one, in, you know, like a period piece set in the 50s or 60s when the series, you know, the book series was going. And I can see the wisdom. Cool. I can see the wisdom of that. I do think there's something about retro spy stuff, like retro futuristic spy stuff, feels cool, you know, from a design standpoint. So maybe that's a way in. But what about you, Steve? You haven't said much. You have any care?
I don't really. I mean, like I don't. Well, I mean, I guess just because I feel like no matter what take they have, there's probably immediately someone's going to point out, even as you're mentioning some of those things, it's like, well, that was Kingsman or you know, or the Kingsman, or, you know what I mean? Like there's always going to be some reference point for the genre specifically of like, it's probably in some way, shape or form, it may have been done already, but it doesn't matter if it's been done. That's why I don't really care so much about like the setting or like what the approach to, you know, keeping Bond going is. I'm just way more interested in things like, who do they have making these movies? You know, who do they have writing the movies? Like, who does Amazon find to do this stuff? Like we talked about before we started recording, like, you know, the big report today, you know, in the light of all this acquisitions and the change at Amazon is that, like, you know, Christopher Nolan almost directed a Bond film before he did Oppenheimer. And that's something that people have been wanting forever. It's like, that seems like a no-brain thing. Like he could probably make an incredible Bond film or an amazing spy film, whether it was Bond or not. But they wouldn't give him final cut. So he goes and makes Oppenheimer and wins all the Academy Awards you can think of for that film. So, I mean, like, that's an exciting thing to me. I don't care what kind of Bond film it is. That's just icing on the cake for me. But it's more of, who do they have making these films? And that's probably my main concern when I kind of piggyback on my comment earlier about, like, what's Amazon's approach to making these films? Who's making those creative decisions? You know, and also, who do they have that, you know, who do they cast to be Bond? If it's a man or a woman, like, I don't care. I just want to, you know, I want the quality control to be there, because I think for the most part, especially the most recent Bonds, they're all, you know, pretty entertaining, and most of them were at least good, or not, if not very good. Honestly, the last
for
one
their era, always like well made. You know what I mean?
Exactly. I mean, even like getting Cary Fukunaga to do the last one, I feel like it was a really inspired choice, and it shows it on the screen, and like, he's an incredible director, and it's like, that's kind of like an off to the side decision, and it's like, he made a great Bond movie. Like, it's not the best Bond film, but it was pretty entertaining, and most people really enjoyed it. It was a pretty good send off for the character, or at least Daniel Craig's version of it. So, you know, I think the context of what it's about, what's the take, what's the approach, you know, that's exciting and like something I look forward to hearing about. But more things I care more about probably are things like, you know, the quality and level of the actual creative side of things, like, you know, because that's what they've been trying to wrangle away for so long from the Broccoli's, and it's like, now they have it. I just hope they don't, you know, mess it up and, you know, do any harm, because it's a renowned thing, just like Ronald said, Bond of the genre. It's like Bond and what, Mission Impossible, you know, it's like, those are the trademark or the big names that everybody thinks about. So I just want to see more of them, I guess. And then, again, that's back to my point about the pacing. I don't want it to be too fast, too furious. I want it to be, you know, just maybe better paced. And
you don't want it to be too XXX. You don't want it to be too Chronicles of Riddick.
No,
you just want it to
be. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, makes sense.
But yeah, man. I mean, it's definitely exciting, and it's an interesting development. So.
Oh, the most exciting development is, I did look it up, and Cubby Broccoli
You said you wouldn't.
Yeah, I know, but Cubby Broccoli has claimed that his family was the first to cross rabe, if that's how you pronounce that, and cauliflower to create broccoli. But other people say that's not proven. But he says, we're the Broccolis who created broccoli. And someone else pointed out that, like, imagine being so famous that, like, helping to create the James Bond films would not be the biggest thing you'd ever done, but you've actually made broccoli.
Hey, broccoli?
Yes.
Wow.
But
what a life.
Anyway, well, that's a good. I like when we get a little news in there, a little current events.
There we go. A little something.
Yeah.
moving on to the required viewing. This was my pick this week. This was the new release that came out theaters, I don't know, just over a month ago. One of Them Days. This is a movie by Lawrence Lamont, stars SZA and Keke Palmer, Cat Williams. Who else is in this? I'm escaping my mind right now. A very brief role. Lil Rel Howery's in it. Maud Apatow. But yeah, this is like a buddy comedy, a day in the life of a buddy comedy that did pretty well at the box office for what it cost to make, had great reviews. And some of my friends that had seen it had, basically said that they all of them at least really liked it. So yeah, came out on video on demand recently. So I thought it might be a good chance to catch up with it because I missed it in theaters. What'd you guys think?
I enjoyed it, man. I kind of raved about it a couple episodes ago. I thought it was fun.
Yeah.
Paced pretty well. It felt, it's funny, as strange as it was, like what happened with the rent and all that stuff, like all of it felt very grounded. Like it feels like I know people that have had crazier days than this concerning rent. It's like
right.
I've absolutely had friends that have had.
Well, it's about the feeling of a crazy day too. You know what I mean? So it's like whether you've had a day that crazy, you know about days like that.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
You just see the title and you know that you've had one of them days before.
Yeah.
But you're right about it being kind of grounded. Like, it's grounded in real concerns. Because, Ronald, this is something I thought a lot about when I was watching it. Was like, where's the line in this type of scenario? Comedies, they're grounded in one way, but not in another. Like, so in one way, Rent is very grounded.
Yeah.
The way it's depicted in this film is not really realistic. Like your landlord doesn't usually do the nice thing of bringing all your things carefully out to the curb. Like, that's a lot of work for the landlord to do. But we're in a slightly cartoon universe, but you're just because you're in a cartoon universe, you're not, you like, cartoon rules don't apply to everything. So it's an interesting, I don't know, I've been thinking a lot about this recently, looking at comedies. I watched all the Dumb and Dumber movies recently for another podcast. Just different. I've been thinking about idiot comedies and buddy comedies and kind of hangout comedies like this. And one of the things that they have to do is create a sense of heightened comic stakes, but also like this, like they tend to work best, these buddy comedies anyway, when there's either like a really cool action plot or there's just something relatable about the scenario. And I feel like the way this movie starts off with the time clock and everything, it is a huge element, Ronald. It's almost like this is the way you tell the story about the craziest day you ever had, even though it didn't go that crazy.
Yeah, I've definitely, like, living in the city, like certain parts of downtown, you will come outside and somebody shits out there, so, like, and then you like give it 10 minutes and a crackhead's gonna steal all this stuff. Like, it's the guarantee. We had this experiment when I moved out of my apartment in Fells Point. I'm like, I'm gonna leave my bed here. Let's see what happens. And 2 minutes later, there's somebody with a bed frame looking like Jesus Christ, like they're hanging on a cross, running down the street with a frame, like a whole frame on their back. I was like, that's just, it really is heightened as it seems. It really happens so frequently in those like city environments that people shit just gets put out like that.
Yeah, and or you'll walk people. You don't even know why it's there. There'll just be a box of books or something sitting on the stoop, and you're like, well, okay. No, I just thought it was interesting in that sense. Like, it definitely made me think of those movies where, you get the sense. And the other thing this movie does is you have to have the two friends. They have to sort of break up at some point.
You gotta. Yeah.
You got to have shit come out between them that is way... I mean, it was interesting how watching Dumb and Dumber and then watching this, I saw so many parallels because there is like the one friend who's slightly more troublemaking than the other friend, but the other friend has their own issues. But then there's the whole thing of the big breakup and then what they do when they're apart and how they really go for, like, they really say shit to each other that's way harder than it should be.
Way too mean.
But I think that, like, there's a fundamental thing, though, that does make this thing work. And I mean, you kind of alluded to it between Keke and SZA as far as just the performances. But I feel like knowing that this movie was well regarded by people or that people had enjoyed this, it made me relax so much when I put it on. I was just like, I know this is going to be a good time. It's 97 minutes or something like that. And I like Keke Palmer. But instantly, like, their chemistry was so easy. It was very easy going. And so I think that is a great gift when you're watching this type of comedy, is to have characters on top of the scenario being kind of relatable, but just their friendship and the way they were going back and forth. Like you got who they were supposed to be. And then you also saw how they were doing something that's not totally the archetypes that you've seen before. I do think ultimately it's like a joke over the movie that the big job she's dreaming of is like managing a fast food place, you know?
Yeah.
But it's also played kind of straight that she's trying to get something better for herself. And I feel like the movie, again, it walks that line of this is heightened and this is silly, but there's also something like heartwarming, I guess, is the word I'm kind of walking around here. This is a very heartwarming movie in a lot of ways.
Yeah, for sure, man. It's like when you're in a chaotic situation and everybody's broke and your saving grace is just a stable job. I get it.
That's the key. Is like, that may be like what she's kind of aspiring to, but I think in context of maybe what she has access to from that point, that is a big thing, you know?
No, right. That's what I mean. It's like it makes you realize it really is like a better job, more money. That's something real, you know?
Yeah, and like stable. And but I don't know. Yeah, I kind of love this movie, to be honest. Like I felt like my expectations just from the buzz and, you know, the trailers and seeing them talk about it on a couple talk shows and whatnot. Like, I just love these kinds of movies, you know, like these two friends, you know, a day in the life. I love the clock ticking. I love, you know, the expiration date of something, or, you know, the time.
Steve, I love that it goes from the eviction clock to the certain death clock at that one point in the movie.
I love
that was great.
I loved it. It just like flipped over. I loved it. But I don't know, like that kind of thing to me is like so kind of it kind of gives a fresh take on how to manage this kind of film. And I feel like, you have two people that are just have great chemistry, one. And honestly, Keke Palmer is like way up there for me, dude. Like,
so good.
Yeah,
man.
She is incredible. Like she had, I don't know. I mean, I tried to think of it before we were talking about this today, but like, I don't know that there's a more charismatic, like, person in movies and TV. And she's in a lot of different like forums of media, you know, podcasting, television, movies. Like, she's all over the place. But like, just she's so charismatic and she's so dynamic and she's funny as hell. Like she's gorgeous. I mean, she's just like a total package.
And she feels real.
She really does feel like someone you know.
Yes.
And yet someone that is like a star. You know what I mean? Like, it's a weird balance of like a familiarity and like something that someone could aspire to be. You know, if you look to be like a celeb, if you want to be an actress or whatever, like, it's a very special thing. And I was trying, you know, to kind of connect some other performers to that kind of thing. And like, some people came to mind, but I mean, I think just of what she's been putting out, and like when I do see her and I see her cross through these different channels of media, it's a pretty special thing that she's consistently that person in all of those forms.
Yeah.
And this movie is like, she's a star in this movie. I mean, they're both great, but I mean, obviously she is the star of the movie and she's like our lead, but and she's hilarious. My God, she's so funny. Like, her physical comedy in some of the scenes is great. Like, how awkward she is in certain moments is great. And just them together. It's just, I don't know, man. This is kind of the kind of movie. I haven't seen a really good one of these in a while, I feel like. That doesn't depend on something else. Like, it doesn't get too much into the guy she likes, or it really just focuses on like the friendship.
Yeah.
Like, you know, how are they not will they get through it? It's like, you kind of know they're going to get through it,
right? But
like, how do they do it, and how funny can they make it?
That's why the movie up in the stakes in the last act.
Yes.
I think I couldn't tell. I feel like when it was going a little too hard into the dramatic with like the fire and them kind of like having their dramatic moment when they think they're going to die. Some of that stuff, I don't know if that stuff worked as well as the more comedic stuff.
Right.
But I do think that the fact that in the last act they did see the need to go, okay, we need to up the stakes a little bit so that the friendship stuff feels like something that might happen and not get resolved immediately, you know. And I think that like Lolo, is that the name of the guy, the gang leader, like him showing up, he was funny, you know. I feel like when they were keeping it funny, it was when it was working the best, you know. And when they tried to go a little dramatic, I don't know if it quite, like, the third act got a little out of hand in that sense. But I think you could find a lot of comedies like this do that, like when they're trying to have resolution and stakes, that the tone might get away from him a little bit in that final stretch. But I thought this movie was really interesting because of how generous it was to pretty much all the characters at the end. You know, all the characters got a little moment, or most of them anyway, got a little beat that explained like how they turned out or what was happening with them. Even the I don't remember her name, Bernice, was that the name of the kind of antagonist? Yeah.
Oh gosh,
so like, but even she got kind of like it didn't end with her in ruins the way you thought it might. You know, she was a comic character, and you almost felt like the movie. I actually think the movie lets you in on a little bit of that kind of humanistic side early, because when she's mad, she's like, the whole neighborhood saw me fall on my ass, so I got to kick their asses. But then also there's a moment where Kiki, when they're running away, she's like, is she all right? And I think that little thing, and that other little moment where Bernice is like telling the guy, that dumbass guy, it was so funny, but like telling him and his giant dong that she's like humiliated. Like, I don't know, those are the type of notes that make a movie like that feel a little more genuine, because it's not mean-spirited, you know, even towards the awful characters. The funniest awful character was the woman at the loan place.
She's so funny.
She was so mean. I just loved how she was like laughing at when she found out what their credit score was or whatever, and she just, but like, you kept thinking there was going to be some comeuppance for her. And I love that the movie was smart enough to know that, like, as mean as she's being, she's correct.
Yeah. Have you seen her on Curb?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought
oh my gosh, she's so funny, man. One thing I was going to say is the guy King Lolo, man. What is his name? If you look,
he was funny.
Amin Joseph. He's on Snowfall, man. He's like one of the main characters in Snowfall. Yeah. Oh my God.
I knew he looked familiar. I couldn't place him.
Oh, good on that show.
Yeah, he's good.
It's everybody. You know what I was thinking too? Maud's character, Bethany. I think a lesser movie would have made her seem like a kind of exaggerated.
She would have been a total bitch. Like, she would have been a phony or something. She would have been like, they would have outed her as not being very genuine. But instead, they have to come to terms with the fact that she's actually like
pretty cool and can help them out. And,
she's got that well-meaning white lady syndrome thing going on, but she actually is well-meaning. You know, I think that, and again, that's a little bit of generosity. You're dead on that character would have been a much bigger caricature in a less sweet movie.
It's cool, man.
And it would have been fine if that character had been awful, but I just think that this movie is not trying to like pick on easy targets. The only person, honestly, who does not come off well is Uche, the landlord. He's the only one who basically gets screwed. I mean, I know he wasn't taking care of the place, but I did think it was funny that they basically burned the place down, and there was just no question that it's all his fault because the building was in such bad shape. That didn't quite make sense to me, but I get the idea.
Oh, Uche, man.
Also, we got to give credit to Cat Williams. His character, his bits didn't all work, but I loved him saying, "Take heed." And then when he was like, "Heed," it's not being taken.
Yeah, that was good. That was good.
Oh, they didn't take heed. Why is nobody taking heed?
Why is nobody taking heed?
Yeah, but his first moment, if he had only been in the movie for the one moment where he's outside the loan place and just out of nowhere bangs on the windows, and what does he say? He says something like, "If you don't have the money this month, you're not going to have it next month," or something like that. I just thought if that had been it, I would have been like, "Man, that's a great moment," because that's so true. Whenever you borrow money from your future self, it's a real bad scene.
It is.
Also, I literally laughed so hard I cried at that closing gag when it said that they're working on their credit. It's good they now have a combined score of 447.
They should have taken heed.
I love how that comes back around to her like making fun of like, this is the lowest score I've ever whatever.
She's like laughing. She's so. And then later when she sees him, she's not like apologetic. She's just clearly not. Again, they're okay with her. They say something about her. She says she's extra or something like that.
Man.
But no, you said it though, Steve. Keke Palmer sells so much. Like, she can sell all the nervous. You believe that she's nervous around some guy.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like, wait, in the real world, you wouldn't believe Keke Palmer would be nervous around anybody.
Right.
But no, it was funny characters. I mean, there's a tradition of this type of hangout movie, kind of neighborhood movie, that I feel like this fits right in. Like, it's just
Yeah. If you told me this was SZA's first movie, I don't know if I would have believed you. I mean, she's not like the greatest, but
she's
great
good.
in it.
Yeah, she's really good.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
They
the
have great
character.
chemistry.
It's cast. If you're cast right, you know.
Yeah,
It's true.
for sure.
It's true.
If you told me that if I didn't know who she was, and you're like, she is a multi-platinum R&B star, I would be like, bullshit. she's an actress. It's really cool.
That was awesome. Yeah, no, I really liked it. I was really happy with this film. So,
Cool.
on to the next.
John, it's your pick, right?
Yes, it is. And I call, we call audibles sometimes once a pick has been made, but this time I call an audible on myself, and it won't be the second. It won't be the second time. It won't be the first time. In fact, it is the second time. Oh, by the way, before we move on, there's one other thing I forgot. I'm looking down here at my background pictures. I want to do an update about these guys. Did you notice the reference in One of Them Days? Did you notice, I think, evidence that clearly the ambassadors of Hollywood had gotten to this production as well as ours? Did you catch the one moment?
No.
The moment where Kiki's character in the beginning tells some girls that she knows that have like come into the restaurant, she tells them they're going out to party again, and she says, don't forget to wash your ass, which, as you'll recall, that was what Mel Gibson required we incorporate as a moral into the movie that the ambassadors of Hollywood forced us to make. It
clearly sounds like they took heed.
I think that, right.
Take heed.
And that's probably why there's so many references to taking heed in the film, is because the producers and writers of One of Them Days were taking heed from the ambassadors of Hollywood.
I like it.
I just want to let you know we figured it out. Anyway, my pick was going to be a movie from 1973 directed by Robert Altman and starring Elliot Gould. A detective sort of comedy, satire, thriller called The Long Goodbye. But as I dug into it, I found out that there's some kind of blackface scene in that. And so I took a hard turn away from The Long Goodbye. I might still be checking it out, but I'm not going to recommend that people watch it. And I also, especially for this feature, I don't want to recommend a movie that we know I mean, if blackface ever sneaks up on us in a movie, okay. But I'm not going to pick it knowing it. But I did like the name, The Long Goodbye. And I thought, so I want to choose another movie that has the word long in it and a salutation. So I found myself realizing it's been a long time since I've seen this movie from 1996, but I would like to watch it again, and I would love to talk to you guys about it. So The Long Kiss Goodnight, starring Samuel L. Jackson and Gina Davis, written by Shane Black and directed by Rennie Harlin. So this is a movie I remember really enjoying, but I've only watched it the one time, like when it was fresh on video. So
Charlie Baltimore?
Yes.
Woo!
I love this movie.
I haven't seen this in so long.
I love it.
So The Long Kiss Goodnight.
Good stuff.
And if you're a film historian who wants to be informed about movies that haven't aged well, supposedly The Long Goodbye is a great movie.
Yeah, I was gonna say I've always, it's on my like watch list on IMDb, and it's like always one of those ones that's on a list of like great movies. Like I had, what you mentioned, I had no idea, but it is definitely the one. It's definitely one of those movies like that's on every list. You know what I mean? But all right, cool. So what else have you guys watched? Let's go through a little round robin, like
I'll let you guys go first.
Bite-sized things so to kind of keep this efficient here.
Yeah, I didn't watch much, so I'll let you guys go.
Okay, John, have you seen anything good or anything at all?
I saw something that I think Ronald saw. A movie that in the past might have been a whole episode of this show, but I don't see that happening for this one. Yeah. Captain America: Brave New World.
There you go.
What you guys think of that? Latest MCU movie. Well, Steve, what I would say about this, it is definitely the latest MCU movie.
As you just said. Okay, so that was accurate.
I mean, I stand by that.
Checking my notes, John. There's no need to correct that post production.
I feel like people who are saying this is a friend of mine took his son and a friend of his son's to see it, and he walked out in the middle and texted me and said it was the worst movie he's ever seen.
What?
But his son stayed and watched it, and his son came out later and he said his son said it was mid, and I thought to myself, I agree with his son. I don't agree with, I can't imagine anything that would have made me so mad at this movie that I would get up and walk out. But I do think it has issues that make it like a poor argument for the state of the superhero movie. But Ronald, we've had so many days since we saw this movie that we've had this conversation offline. I think you said something interesting that I think I agree with, which is that this movie is kind of like a new starting point, a new baseline.
Yeah.
I think people who want to say this is the worst movie in the world are probably people who we've been talking about who aren't on board necessarily for the comic bookiness or the Marvelness or whatever. Yeah. So I would say that my reaction as like a comic book nerd is I'm glad this movie exists. I like the story points it gets going. I like the things it introduces. I do think there's a couple of performances in this that, despite the movie being reshot and rewritten and hacked together, and there's so many seams on this thing, Steve. There's so many seams like glued over with like ADR dialogue that is like dumbed down because it's a line that's being stuck in to explain some connection, and it makes it feel like it's written for 6-year-olds, and then there's like action that feels like if it were shot really well, the choreography might look cool, but the way it's shot just feels kind of like Falcon and the Winter Soldier or something, just kind of unimpressive overall. So as far as, is this the movie that's going to save everybody's opinion of the MCU? Definitely not. No. Is this movie a building block for story that's interesting? As a comic book nerd, I think this is cool, and I'm glad this stuff is on film and it exists in a movie. As a person who goes to see movies, this is not the Marvel movie that the ones that people love. This is not that movie. It just doesn't have that much charm and style going for it. But it's not without high points. And I think like Carl Lumbly and Harrison Ford and Anthony Mackie all do a pretty good job with the material that's given to them, even having moments that I would say are powerful. And Ronald, I know you'd mentioned one of the things you said to me was you thought it had a few gripping scenes. So I guess I'd kind of throw to you and say, maybe you can expand on that, the idea of like what strengths this movie has before we maybe talk about a couple of the problems.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that really brings the movie together is the history of super soldiers and some of the storytelling that was done in Falcon and the Winter Soldier with the first soldier, who was what's that guy's name?
Isaiah Bradley.
Isaiah Bradley, who is incredible in this movie. Like real like heartfelt performance. And
good chemistry with Anthony Mackie too.
Really good chemistry. Anthony Mackie. Anthony Mackie. Have you ever seen that clip, man? Have you seen that clip of Anthony Mackie doing Spider-Man? It's like, pa-choo, pa-choo, wee. It's so funny, man. But it just reminds me of like, I think I haven't liked quite a few things that Anthony Mackie's done, but he's really good in this movie. It's really hard because I'm vouching for him in this movie, but this movie, it's not solid. It's not really, but that storyline between Isaiah and Cap is really strong. Mm-hmm. And even some of the, Harrison Ford and him have some scenes where you're like, oh, I can see why this is so compelling on paper in the office when they were talking about it. You know what's strange to me? This is one of the only movies post Eternals that addresses any of the things that happened in Eternals.
Yeah.
That is strange.
Yeah.
And that to me is one of the things that even makes this movie more interesting, that it's really trying to tackle anything that happened prior to, let's say, Shang-Chi. Like it's like addressing things that really happened in the world. That thing that's like right in the middle of the water, they address it. It's a thing. It's there.
And no, it's the source of adamantium, or adamantium.
Yeah, and
which is, if you don't know, if you're not a comic book nerd, that's the metal that's in Wolverine's skeleton that makes him nearly indestructible. So this is getting into the MCU, the existence of this metal that is stronger than vibranium, which is from, or it's debatable, but it's like it was the other big metal from the Marvel universe. So it opens up a lot of things. And just here, as a Star Wars kid, hearing Harrison Ford say adamantium is just not something I ever thought would happen. So that's exciting.
Watching him being stressed out for the whole movie is hilarious.
Okay, so let's get at this. We talked about, there's two things here that I want to say. One is Harrison Ford is great at playing a guy who's trying to be a better man.
Yeah.
He brings real energy to that idea in this. This character is a sort of villainous character who's trying to be a better man. The script doesn't really support him, but he puts some oomph into some scenes. Steve, you probably have heard this now, but I guess this is, you got to say it if you're talking about this movie. The movie plays the transformation into the Red Hulk as a last act twist.
Yeah.
You're watching the movie, and the last 20 minutes is when you get to, oh, Harrison Ford is the president, and he's turning into the Hulk. Like, they play it like a twist. They play it like you've been led into this movie to think that everything else that's going on is the real story. But instead, all they sold the movie on is the Red Hulk. And he's like not the story that you're following for the first, I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's not like he's not in the movie, but we think we're following different villains and different characters. And it the whole time you're watching the movie, you're going, well, I know how this movie ends. I can't believe that's actually the ending. But, you know, not to say that's the end of the story, but that's the climax of the movie is the thing that all the trailers have in it.
And it's a backdoor Hulk sequel.
Yes.
It's so weird. Steve, it's a backdoor Hulk sequel.
It's the Incredible Hulk sequel.
Yes, you're watching it and you're like, oh, not just because it's Red Hulk. There's a ton of stuff to it.
Yeah.
But it's like addressing things from almost 15 years ago. It's like, what the fuck am I looking at in that respect? But yeah, you could tell, like John saying that I'm talking it out with you. It's really cobbled together in that way. Like, it really feels like, you know what? It feels like a fan edit. It feels like two movies existed and somebody was like, you know, it'd be cool if we combined the latest Captain America and then this Hulk sequel that was like on Disney Plus, that they like cobbled it together because it had some things that were similar, like Harrison Ford was in both of them. You know what I mean? It's like very strange. They feel like very separate things subject-wise that they could have.
Well, they've been making this movie so long, Ronald. Like, that's the other thing, and I was really hoping you would have seen it, Steve, just because I feel like you might have some real insight into this idea too. That, but I'll ask you about it, Ronald. It's just like, don't you think that, like, this might be the last gasp of the old way Marvel was doing things? Like, by all accounts, after this movie, the next movie that got started in production, they were trying to do things differently. They had already started, like Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four are both movies that were made after they were like, we've got to slow it down, we've got to increase the quality control, we've got to define what they're doing. I kind of feel like this movie, if you'll remember, this movie was announced like at the end of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. They came out with an announcement and said, we're doing Captain America 4. They called it something different then. New World Order, I think. But like, I feel like that movie got announced prematurely, and they've been owning up to the fact that they had to do it all this time. And now it's the only reason it really exists is it's like a placeholder that establishes Anthony Mackie as Captain America in a way that feels like they're not backing down from it. I wish that they hadn't spent half the movie with him doubting himself, but at least in this movie, it's a different form of doubt. He's doubting himself because he doesn't have superpowers in this, which is a valid thing. It just does feel like they could have just made a movie where he doesn't doubt himself at all. But I really think that they are past. It's almost felt like a movie they had to get out of their system. And that now we can actually judge whether they've learned anything from this recent period, because this movie doesn't feel like the first movie of the new wave. It feels like the last movie of the old way they did things, because there's so many reshoots. And so, I mean, that's just that Marvel method. And they just sounds like they didn't have I mean, you've probably read about it, Steve. You haven't seen the movie, but you probably have seen the stories. It's never a good sign when you essentially make the movie 2 or 3 times and you've got actors like Tim Blake Nelson saying, I don't know, I've made the movie more than once. And Harrison Ford, who was excited to be in this franchise, was like supposedly really beaten up by it by the time it was over and really did not enjoy going back and going back. He doesn't like it when people don't know what they're doing, you know? So, I mean, like, what do you think about that idea that like you can't really judge the future of the MCU from this, but you can almost kind of judge the mistakes of the past from watching this movie?
I honestly, there's a word that comes to mind, and that's abuse. I think that with the Spider-Man movie and like the information about the animated movie coming with such abuse of their employees and the abuse of the contractors that do CGI from Disney, I think that they've kind of established that there was some abuse going on. And the fact that what you're referring to is abuse. it is abuse. The reshoots, the treating people like, hey, you have 24 hours to cobble together the Hulk doing this thing, or that's abuse. And this culture that existed, that the whole MCU was built on, was kind of that, to be honest. Specifically towards the end, once they started doing way too many things at the same time. So if it means that the old way doesn't exist anymore, it makes me really happy, because that means that contractors such as we've all done independent work before. That means that people aren't going to be abused on the level that they were abused, and they'll be treated fairly, and they'll be given a adequate amount of time to do CGI or rewrite a script or something like that.
Or maybe don't start filming until you have a script that everybody likes.
Yeah. So then, because you're hearing about this stuff that James Gunn's doing, he's not putting something into production until a script's done. That's insane, considering the way that Marvel's been doing stuff. It's radical. It's radical, in fact. So, yeah, I think I'm hoping that this is the end of it, and that may mean that the quality is boosted too. Like if you have something that's completely done, coherent, put together, and then it goes into production, holy hell!
Yeah,
you won't have a movie that feels like 5 movies. It feels like 5 movies.
That would be like making a new Star Wars trilogy after 15 years or whatever, and planning it out before you started.
Oh man. Holy moly guacamole.
Planning out a story. No, I don't know. I mean, I'm hopeful. And again, I'm always glad we get these movies, but I do feel like this one is taking a beating not for people being sick of superhero movies. I think this movie disappointed a lot of people who were hoping it was going to be something that, maybe it's secretly very good. And it's not that secretly very good movie, but it's not like unwatchably bad. And it does have, the stuff that works kind of works. It's just that it feels watered down. And, I would say, like, I think the effects, like the Red Hulk effects, look pretty good. And the fight, is maybe not the most dynamic thing in the world, but it feels comic booky. It feels like something that would happen in a comic book. So, I'm glad they got past this one. I'm glad they can move on. At a certain point, though, people are going to start to have a question, and maybe it's already beginning, about like whether Kevin Feige is tired.
I've been reading these like calls for him to get fired, man.
I think that seems extreme, but I think him being spread thin, like, we'll see how this goes. This current wave of things, they've got this, they've got Daredevil. They've got a few more things coming that might increase our spirits. But I just don't see how anyone could do that thing he's been doing for as long as he has. At some point, your instincts wouldn't be as sharp. You just need to take a break. Like go buy some new ball caps.
Yeah.
Go on a tour of the world buying the best ball caps available.
Yeah. None with the Blade logo on it, though. Don't tease us anymore, you piece of shit. Yeah. So what else have you guys seen?
Yeah, Steve, what have you seen? You can throw one.
I was going to just mention a couple. I think there was 2 I was going to mention. Wait, no. Did I see 2 movies? Yeah, I saw Hard Eyes.
How was that?
Which I thought was a lot of fun.
Okay.
Like a really like a holiday slasher.
Cool.
I really like Josh Rubin, and he directed this. Mason Gooding is in it. He's one of these guys or these actors, just like super charismatic and just was really fun. And then it's got a cool slasher icon. It may be the movie's kind of doing pretty well. I don't know if there's going to be more Heart Eye movies, but it was a lot of fun. I liked it. I also saw The Gorge, which is Apple TV Plus.
How was that? I really want to see
Derrickson
that
film with Miles Teller and Anya Taylor-Joy. I like that also, actually. Like, definitely had some issues with it because it is doing a lot in terms of like genre mashups.
Yeah,
seems like
it's got like a real romance element to it. It's got a bit of a spy action thriller element to it.
And then there's a sci-fi element too.
And then it goes into a sci-fi, almost horror element to it. But it's a cool original idea, and like it kind of swings for it, and I kind of respect the attempt to kind of put all this stuff together. It looks really good. I mean, I think Scott Derrickson shoots, his films all look pretty good. I think he's a good director, and both leads are good together. Anya Taylor-Joy especially is great. I think she's just great actress, and the balance of those genres that I just kind of ran down real quick. I think she kind of probably would excel in any of those genres as its own film.
Mm-hmm.
And then, the fact that it's kind of doing this dance of kind of going in and out of a lot of these throughout this whole movie. There's some really great action set pieces that are just shot really well and that move really well, where you really see what's going on. You don't get lost. And the idea of the film when it reveals itself is kind of a cool idea for a sci-fi horror thriller. So by the time it gets to that, you've already kind of gone through like a bit of a romance and a bit of this and a bit of that. And it's like, wow, there's another thing that they're going for. But yeah, it's definitely one of the better streaming movies I've seen recently, if you want to put that label on it for being on Apple. But I think Apple makes a lot of pretty good stuff, or a lot of better than most streaming service movies stuff. I don't know how everyone to label that.
No, I think you're right. You're right. I mean, I didn't love this, but I did enjoy it. And I think when you were just describing it, it's like I didn't disagree with anything you said, but for some reason I would say I did find myself getting a little like exasperated with the movie or something at certain points. Right. But I wonder if it's just one of those movies that's like 2 hours and change, and it could have been a more brisk movie or something like that. I don't know.
Probably,
but I do think that like the genre mashup that you're mentioning is the kind of interesting thing about it. And Scott Derrickson is somebody who I find I'm gonna check out a Scott Derrickson movie at this point. So and I do like that it feels like a movie I didn't really know existed, until it. Like I saw a trailer and I was like, oh, I guess Scott Derrickson's been making something, because I knew he was doing Black Phone too, but I didn't know that he had. This feels like one that he kind of squeezed in somehow. So yeah, it's interesting. It's almost like more interesting to talk about than it is to watch for me. But I do agree with Steve that the moments that really come off, there's some cool visual stuff, and like the traveling across the gorge on the zip line, that stuff was really well shot and really interesting. It may, I don't know. I'd be interested to see what you think of it, Ronald.
Yeah. I think that's the only. Yeah, I think those are the movies that I saw. Gorge, again on Apple TV Plus, and Heart Eyes is. Oh no! The other one, the best of that, the best of the three, Companion.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Did you guys watch Companion?
I saw Companion.
Did you like it?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. I mean, I think it's an interesting. It goes in a category with movies like Ex Machina, where, and maybe even a little bit of Poor Things in a strange way, where like you're seeing a character who is a sort of stand-in for like an anti-feminist caricature of a woman, that's created by some people with like ill intentions, that then has a journey of their own, And I really thought I thought it was really like, it was interesting and funny in ways that I think you kind of know the premise right from the start. Like even the movie starts off and kind of lets you know what the deal is. But I do think that the emotional arc of this character, who's a robot that is kind of coming into their own, is an interesting idea. So I would say that is like like it's another genre mashup in that way. It's a little sci-fi, it's a little slasher, it's a little, if you think it's a romantic comedy, I don't see how you could after watching the trailer, but the movie kind of plays like it's a romance at the beginning. As well.
So let me ask you something real quick. Was that revealed in the trailer? Because I did not know that was revealed.
Oh really? Oh shit. Well, I mean, I feel like I got it from the trailer. The fact that it's like she finds the little place where he's programmed her intelligence and sees that it's at 40%, and she goes, "Oh really, Josh?"
Oh yeah, then dials it up.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I didn't even see the trailer. Like I never even watched it. Okay, so they gave that away in the trailer. That's disappointing.
But they don't give away much about the situation. But it is weird how much of the situation they do give away in terms of that. Like, because you do get that moment. But I remember thinking that line delivery is really great when she goes like, Josh, the way she says like disappointed and kind of scoldingly when she realizes what he's done, and then she just instantly dials it up to 100. I thought that was okay. But no, it's a scary idea, but it's also like a great comeuppance for all these characters that come across. I don't know. It's just an overall interesting treatment of that. So if it is vaguely familiar, you haven't seen it done like this. And what's her name from Yellow Jackets?
Sophie Thatcher.
Sophie Thatcher's great.
Yeah, she's really good.
Yeah,
I like Jack Quaid too in it, and even I thought everybody.
Everybody's
really,
good,
really fun, and like definitely plays up the kind of character that they're supposed to be. But I really like Aaron and I watched this together, and we were like kind of piecing through the plot and like the dynamics and the mechanics of like of her character. And kind of how they approach, and kind of like I like the way he approaches trying to correct the problem that they've created, like with her, like the things you just mentioned, dialing these like things up, hacking something, and or side loading something. Like there's all these approaches that he's trying to use his technology to kind of fix something. Just really clever, I think, and like it kind of all works. It all kind of pieces together, with the exception of a couple pieces in like the last act of the film that were kind of like, I don't know if that would have happened that quickly,
right?
But yeah, like we were both like, wow, this was really entertaining, and you immediately are like, they're like all so kind of mostly despicable, and you're just like rooting for her. It does a good job of like kind of getting you on that team real quick, and hoping that somehow she kind of gets the upper hand,
even though there are other aspects to the other characters that are complicated or slightly redeeming or something. There's like a mirror version of the relationship that she has that is an interesting thing. I think it's interesting how Jack Quaid, who seems to be, like, if you see him in interviews or when he guests on a podcast or something, he seems to be one of the genuinely most like self-aware, nicest, most easygoing guys in the world. And he has he's got the corner on the market for playing these like weasels, toxic nice guys with ulterior motives, or with I don't know. I just think it's an interesting thing, like between this and whichever Scream movie that was he was in, and then even a little bit on The Boys. Like there's the toxic nice guy thing is something he really does well, where you're kind of geared towards liking him, but you see how he's got his own kind of dark side to him. But yeah, I thought it was a really interesting movie. And I've seen some people kind of criticize the idea that it's like a supposedly feminist movie that is like anti-feminist, but I don't know. I mean, I guess I would feel better about a movie like this if it was written and directed by women. But I don't think the movie trips on some of the usual things that a movie like this could trip on, where it's like, it doesn't like sexualize her too much. And it's not like a leering film that's full of that kind of male gaze stuff that can make this kind of material sort of uncomfortable sometimes.
Yeah.
So I sort of bought the movie's intentions,
What else we got?
Ronald?
Oh, you gonna say anything?
No, I was just gonna say, what about you, Ronald?
I want to emphasize that Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man is one of the best animated things to ever come out.
You made me watch it. I watched it. It's great. I love it.
And then the twist at the end. Oh, Jesus. Just really good writing. This is Spider-Man in another universe. It's done in a really cool way. It references things that you've seen before in a really cool way, especially if you're kind of nostalgic for some of the older Marvel stuff. I mean, you'll feel some of the feels of some of the references, which I really enjoyed. But again, one of the best twists I've seen in a cartoon, maybe even in anything that addresses this subject matter.
Well, really, I would say like what you're getting at is like, do you mean the overall series, or do you mean at the end of the season? No, I'm not. But do you mean the overall arch of like the setup for the show, the arc of the show, or do you mean the last couple episodes, what they set up?
Both.
Okay.
see.
But I mean,
both,
the show takes off from the universe we know in a cool and interesting way.
Yeah,
and I think what's
for
interesting, Steve, is like it's not just a different world. Like you might expect an animated version of this character to just be different because cartoons do that all the time. But this definitely positions itself as like this is the MCU, but it's another universe. It's like this is part of the multiverse that we know.
Yeah.
But the ways that it's different, it's fun to see when a character pops up, to see how this show has envisioned them, to see how this show is bringing them in. I mean, it doesn't just harken back. It's like it harkens back to the comics, like the classic look from like if you know the artist John Romita who drew the characters in the 70s and 80s. Like it's got a lot of that design, and the animation is pretty darn good. Like there are moments where it's got that thing of like, oh, this is a computer model with fake hand-drawn lines kind of mapped on top of it, But there are also moments where that effect is really striking, particularly Peter's design and animation is really like an attractive character design that works really well as like fake 2D. Fake hand drawn. And then I think sometimes Norman Osborn's design as well is just really well drawn and really cool. You told me how good it was too many times, Ronald, so that when I sat down to watch it, I wasn't watching it going, all right, how's this going to be? I was watching it going, oh, this is good. I just have to watch it. And then by the time that awesome opening sequence was over, I would just sit down and watch the opening sequence if you asked me to. I thought the animation in that and the theme song, the way it samples the classic Spider-Man theme,
that's so good.
It's so clever with the way that it does exactly what you were saying, like plays around with what we know and what we love about Spider-Man, but presents a truly fresh version of it. Yeah, really fun.
Yeah. You want to see something interesting? Watch the Jeff Tramiel interviews that have kind of come out. I mean, this guy, he did Craig of the Creek, which is really good, and a bunch of other stuff on Cartoon Network. But they already signed on for 2 more seasons. He has it mapped out like
beautiful
clockwork. It's done. He's like he has it. He just has to animate it. Have it animated. He has it all mapped out, which is really cool. So that Paradise also getting really good. Unreal. I don't know if you guys are caught up on that, but I think I have one more episode. Really good. I saw a documentary called "We Beat the Dream Team," which is about the select team, who is like the practice squad that's supposed to play against the dream team. And this is like Michael Jordan, Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, and they beat the shit out of the dream team. And there's only a little bit of footage of it, but it's essentially college kids. It's Grant Hill, a couple other players that you may know who beat the dream team in a practice game. And, this is when the dream team was, I mean, just for context, man, look up the Dream Team scores of some of these games. It was like they were beating teams by like 40, 50 points. They would sit people down and they bring in the second squad and then they put they go up 20 more. It was like ridiculous sort of things like that. So yeah, it's really good, worth checking out. And the last thing is I'm trying to catch up on the damn Mission Impossibles. I'm rewatching stuff from the beginning, and I watched the first Mission Impossible, which was so fun that I forgot how fun this movie was. Brian De Palma, you start off with Ethan, and his whole team essentially dies in the beginning, and then it just it's like what am I watching? It's like it subverts all these ideas because these are all lovable characters. You're like,
I know, yeah, that
right.
movie, it really was a surprise that he didn't have a team.
Yeah, we're gonna go.
And I think that was a lot of people's complaint, was that Mission Impossible was always a team show, and the movie turned it into a more like an '80s style man on a mission by himself kind of thing. So, but no, it's really well made, really well made movie, and I think that movie has aged really well in a strange way. The first one,
man, so fun. So that's what I've been consuming. I've been kind of laying low on the new stuff, but I think that this weekend I'm gonna probably try to eat pretty good and watch a bunch of stuff that's been sitting in my queue.
Nice.
Well, I'll just mention I saw the Flow.
How was
The
that?
animated film. Oh, beautiful. Loved it. Loved it.
I gotta see it.
I almost made it my pick for required viewing, but I didn't know if you guys had seen it yet, and so I was like, well, I won't mention it. But maybe if everyone, maybe that can be like a stealth movie we all plan on seeing for the next episode if you haven't. But I thought it was
I'll for sure check it out.
really cool, like a great combination of like not magic, but like magic-ish. Like it's not totally realistic. It's a slightly magical world, but it's also the animals can only do what animals can do up to a point, and it's just very like it's almost like a myth or a fable, but it's basically just there's a flood and this cat has to be on the move or it will drown in a flood, and along the way it runs into all these other animals and the way they interact and stuff. It really reminds me of the way I would play when I was a kid, and my bed was a boat. And like at nighttime, I would like get all my stuffed animals, and they would be like running, and I would be jumping on the bed. But it would be like you got to get on the boat to escape the whatever's coming. And it's like it just reminded me of the way I played. There's something sweet and sort of villain free. There's no real villains in this. There's some kind of, but there is danger and there is a threat and there is a vague sense of like something bad could happen to these sweet animals. But the way they sort of learn each other and learn to kind of help each other, while still maintaining naturalistic animal behavior is really cool. The animation looks very like rasterized almost. Like there's a quality where they are leaning into a very digital looking animation, but through that they find a kind of beauty because the poses, like especially if you're a cat person, or even if you've just observed a cat, the observations of dog behavior too, but particularly the little lead cat. It's just so many great observations about the way cats act and the way they move and their different little micro expressions and stuff. So yeah, it's really fun. Not quite in that vein of like Watership Down or The Plague Dogs as far as like gritty realism, but you feel like you're watching real animal behavior, and that's really cool. And then also I would say I saw the movie The Monkey, which is another movie it would be fun probably to talk about once you guys have seen. It's another Osgood Perkins movie, and this is the weirdness is turned up, the humor is turned up, the gore is turned up. Not everything about it works, but it is. I mean, I was laughing, and there's even like a campy side to the film that's you're very much on board with this movie. It feels like you're kind of agreeing to go see almost like a midnight movie. It's that kind of thing. And then the last thing I'll mention is just something I've watched that is one of the best things I've watched recently, and that's the trailer for Andor season 2. Holy shit, I'm so ready.
Yeah.
I've just about decided I'm going to rewatch the first season. I wasn't really going to, but I think before the new one comes in April, I'm going to make time to rewatch the whole first season. That's one of my favorite Star Wars things ever. I think this might be the best thing. We know they got to finish their story. We know it's the same team from the first season. The best dialogue Star Wars has ever had, some of the best acting, some of the best, like, talk about grounded, taking Star Wars and grounding it, but not doing it in a boring way. I think Andor is really special. So I cannot wait. And that trailer, the use of like contemporary music, and I know some people have complained about all the quotes, although this show is great quotes, but I feel like it's cool for Star Wars to do a victory lap like that because they don't get those kind of reviews with their television shows very often.
That's really true.
For sure.
Yeah. But no, I'm ready.
Okay,
ready to see that new form of Andor that's going to be closer to the movie version where he's like he'll do anything for the rebellion. I'm ready for that.
Killing people in alleys and such.
Oh man, killing his friends because he doesn't have time to deal with their shit.
Cold-blooded. Oh man.
I mean, we have a rule that if one of us gets wounded on the podcast, we will abandon them to finish the show. We've all agreed on that. But
with one of those like silencer.
I've always said if my leg is broken, let me live. But if my leg is broken so that the bone is sticking out, that's when you can get the silencer. Just start screwing the silencer on. Well, John,
I'm so sorry it worked out this way.
Yeah, you've made my day.
Anything else?
Oh, I just wanted to highlight two things for Black History Month, two physical things I want to talk about. One of my favorite criterions that existed, Malcolm X. I think you can just see his face. Spike Lee, written and directed. This is crowdfunded. This is a crowdfunded movie. It's crazy if you look up how this movie came together. Oprah money, Michael Jordan money, fundraisers, you name it. That movie came to be. And the second is a James Wan production, but co-written by Keela Cooper, man. One of our foremost horror writers right now is a Black woman, and I think that people need to look up Megan and some of the stuff that she's touched, Keela Cooper, and just look up her interviews and her inspiration for horror is just insane. But Malignant's like one of my favorite. It's so campy and strange, and it's one of those movies that no matter who you show it to, they're always going to be like, "What the fuck am I looking at?" I'm like, should I like this? What's happening? And then it has a martial arts sequence in the middle of it. It's like, it's an insane movie that worked for me for some reason. It's such a fun movie.
This is the rare movie, and I was actually going to ask you guys this question. If you ever think there's a movie on the show that you wonder if you didn't get it, didn't give it enough credit. I don't necessarily think I would have loved this movie if I'd realized it was trying to be ridiculous. But I do remember the first time we saw it, I was just like, this movie's ridiculous. I didn't like it that much. But I mean, I think I look back now and I realize I was being like, I was guilty of one of my least favorite things, which is like thinking you're smarter than the movie. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, right.
I was like, oh, this movie's full of ridiculous shit. But the more I think about it, there's no way that it wasn't intentional. And I think the one reason why I just didn't think it was intentional was because, to me, James Wan has never shown a sense of humor, that kind of subversive sense of humor, in any of his previous movies. So I just didn't believe that he suddenly in this movie had this huge sarcastic sense of humor about the movie, like a meta sense of humor. And I still am not 100% sold on it, but I'm willing to agree that I was like, I wasn't in on the joke on this one, and so I didn't like it. But I think I would like it a little bit more now that I realized that they were clearly, there's like that matte painting of the cliffside in the house, and the car is parked like 2 inches from the drop off.
Yes,
they knew they were doing that. Like, I think the first time I saw it, I thought, this is stupid, and now I'm like, no, they knew they were doing that, so I was stupid.
It was a chiller, as they call it.
It was a chiller. It was a chiller. But not a thriller.
Sure enough.
Steve, are you muted?
Oh, yeah. Look at that. The little thing came out. Little cable came out. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, there. Yeah.
Not only can we hear you, you sound great.
Ooh.
Yeah. Sound very clear.
That sounds good, man. I don't think we have anything else to talk about tonight. I think we've talked about a lot.
Yeah.
Some would say maybe too much. Some would say not enough, but we're kind of maybe in the middle, hopefully.
Yeah.
Movieschmovie.com is the website. YouTube.com/Movieschmovie podcast. You can go to either of those websites and choose how you'd like to continue listening to Movie Schmovie. And share out a link if you don't mind. Let somebody know about the podcast. Please. Let them know they can listen, watch any way they could probably imagine. We have so many options, and we would appreciate it if you could kind of indulge in any of them for us. Again, reminder next week, John's pick, The Long Kiss Goodnight. And then I'm sure we'll probably talk about some other movies that we've seen, some other TV shows that we've seen. Maybe we'll all talk a little bit more about Flow. I think I probably should watch that. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. And as always, you've made our day. Thanks.
Bye. Please take heed.
Heed has not been taken.
He's not been taken heed.
It's like looking at